In this activity, we'll be creating a program that utilizes generic structures. Once you're ready, load up Visual Studio Code and we can get started. Once Visual Studio Code loads, navigate to your Activities directory. We are on Activity 30, so double-click on a30.rs. Once the activity file loads, review the topic and program requirements. Attempt to implement a solution on your own with the video paused. Once completed, resume the video and I will demonstrate my implementation as well as provide insights to the activity topic. Alright, let's get started. This topic is on generics and structures. Our program requirements are to create a vehicle structure that's generic over the traits body and color. So we can see down here we have two existing traits. We'll create structures for vehicle bodies and vehicle colors, and implement the body and color traits for these structures. So we're going to be creating these two structures, body structure and a color structure, and we have to implement the body and color traits, which are presented right here. We want to implement a new function for vehicle that allows it to have any body and any color. And we also want to create at least two different vehicles in the main function and print their info. So we'll need to derive debug for all of our structures. So the first thing that I'll do is I'm going to create this vehicle structure. And it has to be generic over two traits, body and color. So that's the first thing I'm going to create. I'll go down here and I'll create it right below these traits. So I'll create a new struct named vehicle. And it's going to have two generic types. So it's possible to include multiple generic types. B will be for the body, and C will be for the color. We don't have to use T, and in this case, since we have more than one generic type, it's a good idea to use a letter that kind of corresponds to what you're working with. For the generic constraints, I'm going to use body for B, and I'm going to use color for C. Within our structure fields, we can have our body be a B, and our color be a C. So what we're telling Rust in this case is we have a vehicle structure. We have a vehicle structure here. It has a generic type B and a generic type C. Whenever we create a new vehicle, we have to supply a body and a color. The body is a type B, so it must implement the body trait. The color is a type C, and that must implement the color trait. The next thing we need to do is implement a new function. So if we look at our requirements, it indicates that we have to implement a new function for vehicle, and it needs to allow it to have any body and any color. So that's essentially just a regular new function. Let's implement that now. As usual for implementing functionality, we use the impl keyword. So we'll implement functionality for a vehicle. Now, since this is a generic structure vehicle, and we have two generics, we also need to include those two generics here on our implementation. Our generics will look just like this, and that'll be present after the impl keyword. So we'll have a B, and that's a body, and we'll have a C, and that's a color. The generic types on vehicle will be B and C. We can then implement the function. So we'll have public function new. It will take a body, which is a B, color, which is a C, and it will just return a self, which is a vehicle. We'll then return self with the body and the color. Now what we have here is our implementation block. We're setting up two generic types. B must implement body, C must implement color, just like the vehicle here. We have the name of our structure, and we're using B and C. So this B refers to this one, and it implements body. This C refers to this one, and it implements color. Since we already created our generic types on the implementation block, we can use these generic types here and here within our function. We don't need to make new generic types for this function because we already set them up right here. Although you could if you had additional generic types that you wanted to use. Now that we have our vehicle structure created and our new function created, we can start making some types and implement the traits that are present up here. Our requirements indicate that we need to have structures for vehicle bodies and vehicle colors. So let's start with the vehicle bodies. For the vehicle bodies, I'm going to use a car and a truck. So we'll create a new car, and we'll create a truck. For both of these structures, I'm going to implement the trait. So we're going to implement body for car, and we're going to implement body for truck. If you'll note up here, our traits actually don't have any functions defined. So we're just using the trait as a marker. So these are called marker traits, and it's just to signal to the compiler that something must implement these traits. We don't have to have things here, and that's totally fine. So in our implementation block, we're just going to leave it empty. That way we can implement the trait properly. So we have our implementation for the car and for the truck. We leave an empty implementation. And so this essentially is just using the compiler and the type checker to ensure that we use everything correctly. Next, we need to implement some colors. So I'm going to create a red and a blue color. So we'll have red and we'll have blue. And we'll implement color for red. And we'll do the same for blue. Now that we've implemented our body and color traits on some structures, we can utilize the vehicle structure with these car, truck, red, and blue structures. I'll hop down to the main function, and we're just going to be utilizing the new function that we created on the generic vehicle structure. So the first thing I'll make is a red truck. So let's name it red truck. That's going to be a vehicle. I'm going to create a new one, and it'll be a truck, and it'll be red. Next, I'll create a blue car. So we'll have a blue car. So we'll make a new vehicle, and that'll be a car, and it will be blue. I'm going to go grab the generic structure that we made so we can have a quick walkthrough on how it works. Let's take a look at this red truck line first. We're creating a new vehicle by accessing the new function that is defined within the implementation block. We're passing in a truck and the color red. So the truck will populate the body. The red will populate the color. The body must be a type B, which implements body, and the color must be a type C, which implements color. Since we implemented those traits on these structures earlier, we know that this is the case. And if we forgot to, then the compiler will warn us and fail to compile. Within the function body, we just create a new self, which is a vehicle, and we set the body and the color, which will go here, and the color will go right here. So while there's a lot of syntax when we work with generic structures for the structure itself and the implementation block, when we go to actually utilize these structures, we don't have to do anything differently as we would a regular structure that didn't have any generics. We just call the functions like we normally would and pass in the types that we want to. Part of the requirements indicate that we need to print out the information. So let's just add some print lines. So we'll print out the red truck first. And then we'll print out the blue car. We'll need to make sure that we derive debug on all of our structures. That way this printing works. Now that debug has been derived on all of our structures, we can try running the program and see if we get the correct output. To run the program, we're going to need a terminal. So you can go to Terminal, New Terminal to open up a new one. We're on activity 30. So we can do cargo run --bin A30. So it looks like I have an error. Let's go back to line 32 and see what happened. And it looks like I just have a semicolon at the end instead of curly braces. So I'll fix that there and there. Try this one more time. Okay, so now we're getting our results. So we look at our code. We're creating a new vehicle, and it's a truck, and it's red. And the second one is a car, and it's blue. So let's confirm that that's the output that we got. So we have our truck and it's red and our car and it's blue. So we have successfully implemented the requirements and run the program and everything checks out. This concludes the activity video on generic structures. I'll see you in the next presentation.